as we get started, so you get a good feel of kind of who he was. But he originally was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, and started there and was basically a track star there in Louisiana. I got some pictures of him here. So there he is when he was a young child. We always saw this picture of him leaning up against the car. We always thought that was his car that he had. And later I found out, later in years of life, my grandfather was a photographer and took that picture. That was just a car sitting in a parking lot in church. And he leaned up against it. They took the picture. So that was him about 16. But he did run track in high school and college. He got a scholarship to go run track at Texas A&M there in College Station. And we give him a hard time. He was inducted into the Louisiana Hall of Fame for track and field a number of years back before he passed away. And he still actually holds one of the state records in track and field there in Louisiana. And we've all agreed he will forever hold that state record. And it's simply because they don't run the 330-yard dash anymore. That's the way to always hold a record, you know, is once you do it, retire it. So, you know, in pretty good shape there. But anyway, he was one of the only people I ever knew that, from what I understand, got a degree in insurance. That was something that he did when he was at Texas A&M. They actually had a degree at the time in insurance, and he did that. Started off with the Employers of Wausau, working claims in New Orleans at the time. He often told the story of one of the claims that he was working, that he went and saw one of their clients had totaled this lady's car, and it would have been about 1965, 1966, and so he went out to her home to see her to discuss, you know, the settlement on a car, and offered her $500-600 for a vehicle, and her son came out of the back room with a gun and pointed at him and says, "You're not going to cheat my mama." And so he says, "Well, what do you think her car's worth?" And he wrote her a check. He said $1,200, so he wrote her a check for $1,200. And I said, "What'd you do then?" He goes, "I went back to the office and I canceled that check. And I called her up and I said if she wanted to negotiate for a car, she would come in to the office without her son." And but he also realized while doing claims that he said, when you're really, really good at doing claims, what you wind up getting is more claims. And that's what caused him to shift to sales. He says, you know, because when you're really, really good at sales, you get a bigger paycheck. And so that's what initially kind of caused him to shift for sales. And he got transferred around before starting his own business in 1978. He opened Tedford Insurance in 1978. That is the Copper Oaks kind of business complex at 71st and Yale. And so it was him and my mom and one other employee, and that was how they originally started in 1978. And kind of hung that shingle out there, and he started the business at that time, and moved around a couple of different locations in Tulsa as they grew to where we finally wound up in Jenks, and this is our main building in Jenks, right on Main Street, and we basically put our roots down in Jenks in 1990, in September of 1990. At that particular time, we had one satellite office and 15 employees in 1990 when we moved to Jenks. We now have 7 different offices and about 55 employees. So kind of give you an idea of how things kind of had shifted a little bit since we started there in Jenks. Nice building, built in 1914. Next year it'll be its 100th birthday. So kind of a little bit of history there at the time. But like I said, moved to Jenks and kind of set our roots down at that particular location, and really kind of started growing at that particular point. I was the first son to join the business. I have 2 other brothers that did join the business throughout the early 90s. My youngest brother now is actually a teacher and a coach. He's left the insurance business. But for a period of time, we all 4 of us worked together. And I really kind of, the crux of our story a little bit is kind of from the standpoint of when I was working with my dad, we had a business consultant come in and visit with us, and we were working on an entirely different project. And at the time we were working on the project, this would have been in, I'm trying to think, 2003. We were working on this project, and at the time we were working on the project, he challenged me and my brothers because he asked us, "What would you do if suddenly your father wasn't there anymore?" And we kind of all looked at each other and said, "Well, we don't know." And he basically said, the project we had contracted him with was going to last about 6 weeks. And so he says, at the end of the 6 weeks, in addition to completing our project, he says, you 3 are going to bring back a report to tell us what you would do at the event that something happened to your dad. And so we spent some time over that 6-week period to put a report together, and at the end of the 6 weeks we delivered it to the 2 of them, and they were our audience for us presenting. And it was one of those type things. My dad looked at it and he said, "Thank you very much, that's great, guys, but I'm not going anywhere, so just put that away." That was kind of the way he kind of dealt with it, at the time. And so that's basically what we did. We just kind of put it on the shelf at the time. And really, little did we know, I think, what would transpire about 18 months after that. So this is the actual news clipping that was in the paper at the time for my father. He essentially had a massive heart attack. I hate, in the insurance business, the selling technique of trying to scare people. That's not my preference. I don't like it. And often what I mean, it's that one of those type tactics that you'll hear a lot of times. What would you do if you closed your doors at the end of the day and never came back? Or, you left that morning and you never returned? There's a lot of fear that goes into that. But that's exactly what transpired in our particular case. I was actually coaching. I was the assistant coach for my son's second grade basketball team, and was coaching at 7 o'clock when he called to actually try to schedule with the 2 of us to go to an ORU basketball game the next night. And by 8 o'clock, he was gone. Okay, very interesting, kind of dynamic from that standpoint. He was over at a friend's house watching Monday Night Football, and literally it was over. I will also say he was in the presence of 2 doctors. And so we have some confidence that, if there had been an opportunity for him to have made it through and pulled through, that opportunity was there. It just was unfortunate. On a side note, I will tell you, one of the things going through an event like that, I was truly, truly and humbly amazed at the number of people who showed up at the hospital that night. Because when it took place, there were probably 150 people in the waiting room of the hospital that evening when it happened. But I kind of lead up through all of this, really, to kind of come to this particular point, because I think it's a scary statistic. But that statistic actually comes from the Portland Business Journal, and essentially states that only 1.5% of all companies survive into the 3rd generation. Okay, and that number actually rivals the outcome of the lottery. I don't know if you're aware, if you've ever done statistics on the lottery. Less than 2% of the people 10 years after they've experienced the 2% of the people after they've won the lottery 10 years later are actually better off than they were before they won the lottery. And so I've really thought that was kind of an interesting statistic that's kind of out there. And I've had the experience now to see in other businesses this actually kind of prove its point from the standpoint that within 6 months of my father's passing, one of our clients had a very similar situation where their founder passed, and within 8 months of his passing, the business was gone because they did not have a plan, had not really prepared for what they were going to do kind of in this event. So, one of the things just right off the bat, and I don't think I have it in my presentation anywhere, but I think I saw it in one of the emails that we kind of sent out at one point. But perpetuation requires a strong and solid business plan, strong and solid plan. That's one of the real crux to really survival. And a perpetuation plan is really just being a good leader. I mean, in short, as I go through some of the things that I'm going to be talking about, when you hear perpetuation, hear plan, you can also really put in there leader, because that's really at the core of what's taking place. A lot of this behaviors that I'll be talking about involve really kind of discussing what it is to be a leader kind of in your business and as the owner of the business. So what I'd like to start with here is essentially the successful perpetuation behaviors, because I want to be sure that we use, we look at the creative things that others have done, I guess, that kind of set up for that outstanding perpetuation results that have happened. So I've got a few. I will say not every one of them did my father exercise in the best intent, but a lot of them he did. A lot of them he was very strong at. So I'll go through some of these powerful behaviors to start with. Perpetuating owners' next season of life is clear. Okay? And what I mean by saying that essentially is that they have something else to do, that they're not just locked into the business every day. And we know some of those people that are that way, that they're locked into the business every day, that their entire life is driven by the business. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying that's wrong. But what I am trying to encourage everyone is to establish kind of that next path in life and be involved in other things so that as a point in time of perpetuation of a business or a job or anything that comes to place, that it's really clear that you have something else that you're kind of going for. You have something else that you're working for, that you have higher aspirations. That's what we talk about when we start looking at the perpetuating an owner's, the next season of life is clear. That's what you want to look for, is that you have other things that you're kind of working on that are kind of out there, that you've got something kind of set up for yourself. Perpetuating owners consider it an honor. Okay, excuse me, let me see here. I'm sorry. The perpetuating owners consider it an honor and a hallmark of success to have great talent ready to take over. Okay, and that is one thing I will give my father props for, because he really was in that position where he considered an honor to have other people who were maybe smarter than him, brighter than him. He was a fantastic salesman. Nobody was ever going to take that away from him. But at the same time, it was great leaders find and develop talent to replace them. Okay, they celebrate other success, and that's very important. And that's real key, not just in a business that's looking to perpetuate. It's also a huge key in leadership as well. That's very important. I love this quote. I put it down here. It says, "You can never be promoted if you cannot be replaced." Okay? If you're completely irreplaceable in your position, you'll never be promoted from where you are. But individuals, owners that are thinking about perpetuating, and this applies to key roles in a job, CEOs in a position, doesn't have to necessarily be just the owner. They have to be in a position where they're bringing good talent, help them take over. The next one, a successful perpetuating owner leaves at his or her peak. I truly can say in my father's case, this is not the way I would have advocated him doing it, okay? But he did leave at his peak. I mean, he left at his peak at that particular point. So we've all seen those circumstances where somebody has just stayed too long. How many of you have employees or peers back at the office someplace? You know, you've got some of those. All right, you all know those that have just stayed too long, okay? And that's a scenario that you don't want to have happen as a perpetuating owner, okay? And that's a leadership role right there, is to make sure that doesn't happen, whether it's for yourself or it's maybe sometimes for the people that are under you, under your management that you're looking at, because it can be a very sad story. The next item here, it says perpetuating owners and the organizations follow the perpetuation plan and walk with confidence around the clients to help them feel comfortable about their future. Okay? A solid plans for transferring clients and responsibilities must be put on the calendar and monitored. It must be followed. Okay? It's one of those type items you can have a plan and put it down on paper, but then not follow it. And that happens many times. That does happen many times. People have a plan and not follow it, and they don't monitor it. They don't update it periodically. I can tell you that in my particular case, for myself and my brother, we actually in 2011 sat down and kind of revamped our plan. We bought my brother out in 2010, so it was time to update our plan. And we sat down. It took us 9 months to complete our plan and sit down and put that thing together and come to an agreement on how it was going to look. And then we have to adhere to and have confidence in how the plan is going to take place, how it's going to follow through. The next item, perpetuating owners follows the rules that have been discussed and agree to it in advance. Okay? We're going to get to it when we start talking about the opposite of this behavior, okay? But essentially, when you look at this, when you make an agreement that this is how you're going to do it, you're going to maybe be stepping out of the office and doing other things as that owner or that CEO or whatever it is. You need to do that, okay? You need to allow those people under you to have the opportunity to fill that gap, to step in and have success and be able to celebrate that success. That's extremely important. And I will give my dad credit for that he did follow through very well in this particular point. That we kind of had a plan in place and kind of set things together, and he was very good to allow us to kind of work through that and process it. Perpetuating owner has advisory to get clarity. And simply what I'm talking about in that particular case is it's a challenge sometimes to recognize what's real and what's false, and it can be overwhelming. And so that may be that may be a CPA, that may be a lawyer, that may be a business consultant, okay? But many times we are awfully close to our business and we're in it. And you sometimes need to step out of it. The phrase that I hear often is there are times when you need to work on it and not in it. You're in the business on a day-to-day basis and you can't see the forest through the trees sometimes. You may not be able to determine what's real or what's not real. And it's definitely advisable to have those advisors kind of on the outside who can help you with clarity, help you with focus. And you can find those in any number of ways. There are fantastic CEO groups that are out there that you can meet with on a regular basis, and other peer groups that you can meet with on a regular basis to help you with that clarity, kind of bring you that. Now, this is the fun one here. Okay, we're going to talk about business killing behaviors. Okay, kind of the opposite there. Because this is essentially what happens. I mean, I mentioned those businesses that didn't have a plan, they weren't prepared, didn't follow through kind of with what they put together, and it really winds up being a business killing proposition when those type of things happen. Because maybe I put it as they're willing business owners, but they sabotage themselves. They sabotage themselves. They have what we sometimes refer to as competing commitments, okay, that they have out there, and they need to identify those. So perpetuating owner dilutes the value of those who are succeeding him or her. Okay? And what I'm talking about in that particular case is when you're out there with that individual you're trying to bring up, if you're kind of mentioned along the side with your customers, with that guy who's supposed to be kind of, well, he's doing okay. He's okay. He's coming along. Okay? When you start giving those kind of signals to other people around you, okay, now this is for perpetuating owners, this is for CEOs, this is also just for you talking about your peers. When you're doing those kind of things, the clients, okay, they interpret those type of activities as, man, there's stuff going on the inside, there's problems, okay, and they want to stay away from those type of situations. Perpetuating owner fights to show how valuable he or she is in the organization. I talked about competing commitments just a moment ago. All right, there's a commitment that I want to perpetuate the business, but there's also a commitment that I want to look good. And individuals will fight with those competing commitments at times, that they want to look good, that they want to feel important, that they want to feel valuable. At the same time, there comes a point they have to let things go. They have to turn things over. They have to let others underneath them be successful. Sometimes they have to let others underneath them stumble just a little bit, and that may be a challenge to them. But this is the owner that you would typically describe as being able to say that they didn't feel, that they would never let go. This is the guy you feel like, he'll never let go. That's the type of individual you're talking about there. And they're out there. I mean, they are out there. And I understand it, especially in circumstances where maybe as an owner that you've built a business, you've created a business, and they often refer to it as their baby. Okay? And so can be a real challenge for them. The business and/or the perpetuating owner put the client in the middle. Okay, that is a behavior that you really want to kind of stay away from, because in that situation, the client, they know if they've got an owner who's getting ready to retire, and they are looking for certainty. And what will happen is maybe the owner is frequently meeting with the clients and telling these individuals about these incoming employees or the people who are trying to take over for them, and they'll make kind of those little comments about how they're doing, and if there's anything you need, if anything goes wrong, anything you need, you call me. Basically telling people to kind of go around. Maybe have a kind of discussion that they're not paying me as well as they need to. They don't appreciate the value of what they're getting or something of that nature, okay? Those are underlying currents that the client, if they feel like they're getting stuck in the middle between you and whoever this other individual is, or this perpetuation plan, it's going to cause them to run. They're not going to want to be a part of that. And again, these are all leadership points, okay, that follow whether we're talking about a perpetuation plan or we're talking about just working in your business. You ever put a client in the middle between you and management, it's going to be a deal killer as well. The perpetuating owner doesn't have post-retirement cause or meaningful activity. Now I stick this one in here from the standpoint to let people know, golf every day, okay, while it sounds nice, okay, is not a meaningful activity. Okay, and am I hurting you down there, Andy? I know that probably sticks like a poker. But I just say it from the standpoint. I say it from the standpoint of I can speak to my grandfather when he kind of retired, and my grandmother said I got tired of him being around the house after the first 6 months. Okay. So think about some of those type things. It's having that plan, something that you're doing, and I really love this particular quote. It says, "Leaving something is rarely successful. Going to something is usually very successful." So you always want to be in that situation where you're not leaving something, but you're going to something. Okay, that you've got something post-retirement plans or something of that nature that are meaningful. The next item, the perpetuating owner can't believe anyone has the skills to be as good as he or she. Okay? I think we all fight this. We all want to feel important, and that's not a negative thing. We all really want to know our value. But when we really have this situation where we believe that others maybe are not as valuable, or we feel threatened, we have a tendency to self-sabotage. Okay, create those situations that are self-sabotaging. And that's not a behavior that's going to be very successful in the time when you're trying to transition a business, whether it's through a planned transition or an unplanned transition that's taking place. The perpetuating owner makes sure everyone knows how great he or she is for offering an incoming owner such a wonderful opportunity. Now, this is not a behavior that necessarily tracks with the sudden passing of an owner or founder. Okay, but it is one that if you're looking at perpetuating, that's important. You need to allow whoever is coming in behind you to toot their own horn. You don't need to toot it for them. That's what we're essentially talking about in that particular behavior there. Why is a plan needed? Okay, why is a plan needed? People are apprehensive of change. And if you pour fuel on uncertainty on the top of change, you're going to get a huge fire. I'm going to say it again, okay? If you pour the fuel of uncertainty on top of change, you're going to get a huge fire that's taking place. And I put it up here, I guess, for you so you can see it. I can say that for myself, this was a big factor. And preparing for this and just visiting with several of the staff that were with us 8.5 years ago when my father passed away, this was one that really generated a lot of questions. And I didn't realize necessarily at the time internally how many questions it generated. I knew clients were asking the questions. I knew clients wanted to know what we were going to do. I knew that our companies, our vendors, they wanted to know what the plan was. But as much as that, our staff, they wanted to know what the plan was. We all said we had a plan, okay, but they wanted to see it. And they wanted to see it they want to see it in place. They want to see what was going to happen because they really had questions. As a leader, whether you're that leader who's making the plans, in the event something happens to you, or the leader who's coming in, okay, you need to take every opportunity to paint that picture to everybody of what it's going to be like, because that's something they want to see. They kind of want to see that tangible view of what's going to be taking place, and the communication is critically important to help bring down that tension that's taking place around the event. And I'm speaking of an event in this particular case that was quite sudden. That we go from he's here one day, he's gone the next. Okay, some of these notes really can come from a business that's just selling, that the owner's still around and still taking place. But it's important. Perpetuation plans allow companies to plan for not only a change in ownership, but also to take account for unforeseen circumstances, such as a sudden death of an owner that can take place, that can be there. I never thought we would have to use our document. I never thought we'd have to pull it out and execute it. Okay, that was the furthest thing from my mind at the time that we drafted it, that would be necessary. But it really was. We had to get that. We had to get it out and start planning and getting that taken care of. Plan ahead. Leadership transition must be the #1 priority of any leader. Jack Welch, let me see if I can get my quote here. Jack Welch, CEO of General Electric, says, "From now on, choosing my successor is the most important decision I'll make." And I recognize that when I became a chamber president a couple of years back for another chamber, the first thing was on my to-do list, day one when I took over that position, was find my replacement. Okay, that needs to be kind of the plan. You think about start with who's my replacement. who's going to take over after me? When you take over a new position, new job, whether it's a high-level position or it's a mid-level position, that really is a critical question to be asking yourself. Who's going to be my replacement? And start kind of planning for that. Because again, I said, if you can't be replaced, you can't be promoted in those circumstances. So definitely plan ahead. And I threw just a few items, definitely for the business owners or any planning. I did throw a few items in here that are important as far as looking for what needs to be in your plan, since we're kind of talking about it. The buy-sell agreements are important, whether you have partners, whatever taken place that are there. Life insurance, disability insurance are important components. And really, you know, what I do, I sell insurance, okay? But many times I have to go through the entire process for people to understand the value of how it fits in the plan. And when I say that, I made the comment earlier that me and my brother took 9 months to develop our strategy, okay? And we now have our document. Only a small portion of that entire planning document is really insurance, okay? We sat down and looked at where we thought we were going to be, what might happen, what kind of time periods we were looking at, and then how insurance might fit into it, okay? But that's really only a small portion of what we're talking about when we start talking about planning. So I say it from the standpoint, I don't want anybody getting the feeling that when I throw insurance up here, I'm just trying to sell you something, okay? Because that's not right. I really want you to have a plan. And when we start talking about plans, I can tell you that I met with a client of mine a number of years ago, right after my father passed, and I was preaching plans at that time. You need to plan, and he was quite frank with me. He said, "Because my plan is real simple. My 2 sons can't get along. If something happens to me, the CPA is taking over." And I thought he was pulling my leg. I really did. 2 years later, unfortunately, he passed away, and I found out that he really was serious. His 2 sons cannot get along, and the CPA does run everything. And so to this day, about 6 years later, the CPA is still running it. Okay, and the 2 brothers have separate offices, okay, and that's their strategies at this particular point in time. It's unfortunate, but it is working, okay? It is actually working. So plans can vary. I do have up there limited liability companies. They can be used for family-owned businesses to kind of structure things. Something you should talk with your attorney about if you're kind of making these plans. Retirement planning. You should be retirement planning once you age 20. You should already start thinking about retirement planning. Okay, that's critical. You should be thinking about those items because that's important. If you've ever gone through a major change in life, then you need to remember it vividly because it was undoubtedly painful. Even at their best, transitions are difficult. I put it up there because we had a plan, but I will tell you that it still took us 18 months to cycle through everything. Okay, so even though we had a plan, it wasn't like it fixed itself overnight. It still took time, okay, for everything to kind of cycle through and get taken care of. And so, like I said, it took about 18 months before everything was really kind of finally settled. And we really felt like we had our arms wrapped around what we knew where we were going and what direction we were taking and things of that nature. And I'm pleased to actually say this day that I feel that we've successfully transitioned from George Tedford's insurance agency to the Tedford brothers, okay? That people don't think of it as being his agency any longer. They think of it as being ours. And I look at that 1.5% and think to myself, now it's my job as a steward to see if I can't pass it on to the next generation and make sure there's an adequate plan in place for that to happen. So I'll throw it up to questions anybody might have. I'd be happy to. Yes, sir.
This may be a dumb question, but when you think about insurance, can you insure the entity or is it always about the people? In other words, can you insure the life of the entity or are they going to look at the individual to insure? Does that make sense?
It does make sense of what you're saying. We're always going to look at some component of, we're never going to really insure the entity itself for life, if you will.
Yeah.
We're always going to insure some component. So it may be the life of the owner, the life of the key employee. We may look at insuring the building or the liability of the entity. We may insure the business income of the entity, but the actual entity itself, we're not going to have an insurance policy on it.
So if your key man, is uninsurable, the business would be uninsurable.
In some capacities, yeah. If your key man is uninsurable, then yeah, in some capacities you may have a challenge. And what I think Bruce is bringing up is if you have somebody that's working for you as a key man, maybe his health is questionable, you may not be able to buy insurance on them. They may not be able to have insurance if they have certain diseases or things of that nature. But in the text of a plan is still a plan, and you can plan without insurance. There are some choices that you can make in your key man of how to transfer that risk without necessarily buying insurance. Okay. Any other questions?
Do you work on those plans with self-assuring companies?
You talking about myself personally?
Mm-hmm.
I have worked on those plans but that's that slides into more of a consulting role in that particular case, where I've worked with other companies that they're going to, what we refer to as self-insure, that they're not going to buy insurance in that particular case. But yes.
Well, a lot of times the reason I ask is they'll be mixed. They'll buy some insurances but not others.
That is true. In most cases, I don't find that when we talk about a self-insured entity, that they're 100% self-insured. Normally, they will have some type of insurance at some level to prevent a catastrophe.
Right.
But, we may be talking that they have $1 million retention, if you will, and they insure everything over that.
Okay, the driver for my question is the role of genetics in medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, while it's finally being recognized that they don't have 100% say over the human condition from that point of view, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
What is interesting is that of the 42 cases where they have good solid markers on transfer, half of those are now being prepped up for class action cases against the claimants on life insurance.
Against the claimants?
Saying that they knew in advance of the purchase of life insurance and didn't disclose.
Of a pre-existing condition?
Right.
That's a challenge. Boy, that's going to take us down a path probably don't necessarily want to cover here, but I'd be happy to discuss it with you further afterwards.
Yeah, well, I see
Yes,
it
sir.
coming in.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You said it took you 18 months.
Mhm.
What issues took that long?
Great question.
That is excellent question. It took 18. Actually, I'll give you the reason why it took 18 months. 18 months was the filing deadline for the IRS.
Okay. Motivating factor.
That was the reason why it took
Gotcha.
18 months. It was definitely taking. I mean, because of the size of our agency. By that point, my dad's passing in 2004. We'd grown to about 42 million and had about 40 employees. I'll kind of give you some context of where we were at that time. And with the property and assets that he owned and the business owned, it took that amount of time to try to, how are we going to divide it up? And how are we going to...
Between the brothers?
It's just, the family estate planning between the brothers, how things were going to be arranged. And so there was a lot of deal arrangement that was taking place of how we would move forward. Because his desire, and his particular plan, and it's the way me and my brothers have drafted our plan as well, is he wanted to create a mechanism where we would be able to continue to make sure that our mom was taken care of, but that she didn't become a partner to us in the business. Okay, and so we had structured things to do that, to take care of it that way. And I've structured it in such a way that if something happens to me, that my wife does not have to be a partner to my brother, that she'll be taken care of, but that they don't have to negotiate or anything of that nature at that particular point. But that, to answer 18 months, that's the reason why. And I can tell you that I remember walking into a boardroom kind of like this, and there was the attorney and his assistant and the CPA and his assistant, and I quickly did a sum up in the room, and I said, this meeting's costing me about $550 an hour. And so I said, we're not talking about any sports. We're not talking any ancillary stuff. I said, we're going to get done what we need to get done and move on, because
Sure.
it could. I didn't need him racking up the bill on me on that one.
Well,
chat.
in your pre-planning,
Yes, sir.
was it decided who actually would be like the managing partner, what y'all's individual functions would be of the brothers in the business?
Actually, yes, there was some of that
Written down.
that was already written down,
Okay.
and it was written down because it was kind of this design of how we were looking at carrying things forward in the future already. We had already started looking at kind of futuristic planning of how we were going to do things and kind of move forward.
How'd that shake down once it actually happened?
Very well. There is a dynamic of working with family. Okay, there is a dynamic of working with family that I must say can be a challenge. With my father, because we had multiple offices, I elected for a number of years to work out of a separate office than him, and that tremendously helped our relationship, because we could do great as long as we were talking one-on-one about the reports and how we were doing, but he might try to micromanage me, and that would get very frustrating. And so if he couldn't see me, then we did great. And so we had to take some of those type of things into account working with brothers. And ultimately, that's where we did have my youngest brother choose to basically phase himself out and take a role outside of the agency and no longer be a part. And that was, I think that actually took almost a year to negotiate. I mean, we started that negotiation. He actually took a role with the school in 2007, and our official buyout did not take place with him until January of 2010. So it took a number of years to negotiate. We actually gave him 18 months to determine if that's what he wanted to do. If he wanted to come back, he could. Once he decided he didn't want to come back, then we started the negotiations for the buyout. And I don't want that to sound discouraging to anybody as far as the timelines that some of these things take. It's not a discouragement, it's just a reality. It's just, you need to kind of plan for that. And maybe to answer one of your questions too, as well, is when me and my brother sat down and developed our plan, we didn't actually do it in the same room. We had our CFO meet with us individually, and he met with me, and he spent a couple meetings with me telling him what I wanted and how I wanted things structured, and then he met with my brother and did the same process, and then he kind of drafted a proposal, and then from that proposal we went back and forth on kind of negotiating, but we actually did not meet in the same room at the same time.
Wow.
While that document was being developed, because we found that was the best source for us keeping tensions low, so that I wouldn't get frustrated at him, I wouldn't get mad at him if he asked for something I didn't think was fair, that it wasn't,
Or vice versa.
or vice versa. Yeah, it's
Surely
always
not.
him, never me. Everything I ask for is always fair. But that's how we chose to work it out, because it was what best fit us. And so that's why it took a little bit longer to get done in that particular situation, but it really did help us to develop a good strategy. So I'm very happy about it. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you,
I appreciate
Mike.
it.